Hello, everyone. Ready for our next session here. So my name is Bob Yayak. I'm the CEO of CAE, and want to welcome everybody for coming again. It's been, I don't know, for me, it's been very much of a learning experience all day. We've spent a lot of time talking about higher education, learned about a lot of the data and research behind it, and the institutional approaches and now the classroom approaches, but thought we'd kind of finish up a little bit by expanding the scope a little bit, maybe broadening the lens and thinking about other parts of critical thinking and where it fits in. So we have a very esteemed set of panelists here to really think about it a little differently and kind of move forward. So I'm going to run through, you know who I am now. So Carlos is going to talk to us from PrepaTec, a little bit about what's going on at their level. Luis is going to talk a little about other ways that critical thinking might be involved, particularly in admissions processes. And then we're going to ask Jani to talk a little about where things are going from here. So he gave me some questions to think about, and we're going to start with Carlos. And really, you know, as we've talked about critical thinking today and how we might implement it and where it fits into higher education, and Doris presented data that almost 60% of students entering higher education don't have these skills. What do we do about it? Where do we start? And I mean, Jani mentioned in Finland thinking about moving down into the lower grades. Well, we have someone here, Carlos, who spends a lot of time thinking about critical thinking at PrepaTec. So we have a couple questions for you, Carlos. So really, what does critical thinking mean kind of at a high school level and a prep school level? And how do you actually think about it? And how does it fit in? And what do you do? How do you train your faculty? So maybe you just want to grab a mic and or come up here maybe and spend a little time talking to us about it.
Well, thank you so much. It's an honor being here. And I've learned a lot this evening and this morning from all of you. It's a challenge. It's quite a challenge. And we feel that we have a strong sense of purpose and commitment to send our students well prepared to college. And we really believe that they can have a strong positive impact in their society. So we work hard on that. What have we been doing? We recently upgraded our educational model, particularly thinking on how to make sure that they find the way they learn relevant, interesting, and appealing, you know? So they feel happy and excited about it. What we did was to make critical thinking transversal to all the subjects, so they can develop these skills, but empowered by knowledge. Sometimes we talk about competencies, but we just talk about, you know, critical thinking or communication or leadership. But if it is not empowered by particular knowledge that is going to help them think, in this case, more critical, it's not going to happen and it's not going to make a difference. So that would be like the very first step. You ask, how do we say it? And I would need to read the 3 sub-competencies that we have for critical thinking, but for students, we manage them as can-do statements. And here comes the challenge, but I think that's another question that you're going to make. So in the first person, it's I support my stance based on evidence and reasoning. That's the very first one. And that evidence and reasoning comes from all the different subjects and all the different knowledge that you learn from math, from science, from social studies, etc. Now, the second is I analyze interconnected topics, particularly through different perspectives. And that is crucial for critical thinking, but also for citizenship and for mutual understanding and for the survival of humankind. And the third is I solve problems through inductive and deductive reasoning. Again, not only in physics or in chemistry, but also through arts, through reading literature, through analyzing the impact of the lack of democracy, etc. No? I would like to start with that.
Yes. So how accepting were your faculty of bringing all these new topics into the teaching? Were they on board?
I believe that every single person that dedicates his or her life to educate other people, they mean well, no? And they really want to make a change, so they are on board. But sometimes when you touch or you try to shake what makes these people happy and what makes this person what he is or what she is, then you get into trouble. Because that's what they have been doing. And again, they mean well. So as long as we are respectful, as long as we collaborate with them and not only, now you have to do this, now you have to teach this, they get on board. It's not easy. We had a couple of years with this change management process, but what we realize and we discover is that when you set some rules, the rules of the game, but you are clear that with their talent, with their uniqueness, skills, and thoughts, they can bring to the formula what is more valuable, then they feel happy, they feel part of it, and they get on board.
Yeah, I think we just heard that from our last set of professors, and how they brought each uniquely their skills and this critical thinking to the students. So how do you know whether the students are actually improving? How do you measure or track student progress around these critical thinking skills?
Well, formally, we do have mapped several activities throughout the semester in the different subjects. We call them strategic activities. And they have linked content with the competency that they have to develop and show. And then teachers have to assess those activities with rubrics that are general to all the teachers across Mexico. That's the formality, And then students get some feedback, so we can observe the level of achievement that they have reached throughout their high school. We can see it naturally as well in the quality of the projects that our students develop. That's quite important. When you see them presenting at the end of their high school, they have a beautiful moment that we call momentum, in which they present like the portfolio with their most significant projects that they elaborated throughout their high school. And you see how they express themselves, how they analyze their path, and you can feel it. That's why I said formally we do have the assessment, but then you also can see how they evolve.
I'm going to ask you one more question that wasn't on your list. We talked a lot about motivation, particularly in higher education. Do you see issues with motivation at your level?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'd like to add something to the assessment part. We just had this last couple of weeks, the first round for the first-year students that just finished their second semester of an assessment that we created together with the Institute for the Future of Education here at Tec de Monterrey, that is called the Examen de Aprendizajes Esperados, Expected Learning Exam or Assessment, which does not only assess the competency, but it does assess the knowledge as well, and that is, we believe, an important difference. We are still working on the results, and we're going to keep working on that. About motivation, that's an issue. With this upgraded of the model that we made, we chose six concepts or 6 main topics, one for each semester, that is like the column that sort of connects the knowledge from the different subjects. And we believe that those concepts have helped to make studying more relevant to their students. If you let me, I would like to share with you which those concepts are. In the first semester, they study or they investigate or question themselves about their identity. In the second semester, it's about peace and well-being. The third semester is about sustainability. Then entrepreneurship, which is like the DNA of Tec de Monterrey. Then leadership. And at the end of their high school, particularly through the class of philosophy, the subject of philosophy, they reflect on how they have flourished and how they keep flourishing.
Very good. Well, thank you. So we're going to move on to the next step in the process. Once they leave high school, they have to apply to university. So Luis, Raúl, wanted to get your thoughts on, particularly as you're thinking about admission models and trying to bring diversity and the right set of students into the program. How do you think about critical thinking and other skills that are really going to lead to that entrepreneurial mindset and that leadership and the kinds of things you want to create from the tech students?
That is correct. And first of all, thank you very much to Marco and San and yourself and Doris for the invitation, for being in the panel. I think it's critical that we start thinking disruptively in terms of how we're going to be selecting students that can have that alignment with whatever we want to accomplish with them at the very end of the sequence of different subjects and learning units that they have to live through college. And specifically right now at Tec de Monterrey, where we do have specifically stated in our mission and our vision that we would like to develop this leadership, this conscious this conscious mindset in which they could be entrepreneurial and be agents of change and all these sort of elements that comes out of the leadership concepts. It is critical and very important that we have in mind that we have this pipeline that comes specifically from PrepaTec. But one obstacle that we might find is it's great that we're having a lot of students from PrepaTec, but we not only receive students from this high school, but from all high school all around the country. And we tend to think that by having students with good grades, we're gonna have that pipeline going through. So starting with that, I think that colleges and universities has to start thinking and questioning how the current models of admissions are building towards that goal. You know what I mean? It's more like if you want to have this result, you have to think in the equation all the way through. And basically, in traditional education, we used to we tend to use the standards of an industry. And by the way, the other day we were having a chat here with Doris and Bob, and you made a very, very interesting comment. We do have some standards. I like to say in the industry because I have a business background, and sorry for that. It's not very on the educational lingo, but yes, the educational industry as such has benchmarks, instruments, tests, practices that are generally accepted, right? So that's a barrier to disrupt and a barrier of exit from traditional admission processes. And that's where Tec de Monterrey is working very hard, trying to make a transformation in how we find the best students in the country, both from PrepaTec and non-PrepaTec, and try to find how this different set of skills are being part of a profile of the model student that we want to have with us. That student that's going to be able to end up being that leader, that agent of change, and of course that can have the possibility of being successful not only within the university years, but also when they graduate, when they connect with their purpose, and when they actually not only start being successful themselves, but being connected to a community where they need to be using this type of skills. And talking specifically about the critical thinking, it's also important because we have developed an educative model that is directed towards the solution of different challenges and problems of real life during their formative units. And that has been a challenge. I think that has been a challenge. We have been, why not say this, but we have been at a certain point criticized by the same students that are coming here with great grades, but that they don't know what to do with real life situations because they have not been taught how to fix things. And that's where we start to find the first problems, because we're starting to see that not everybody has the capability or the skills to define a problem, to find solutions, to try to have scenarios, alternatives, and this inductive and deductive thinking that Carlos was talking about is non-present in some of the students, not all of them. So we have to develop instruments and tools where we can identify how those students are going to be making fit within the educative model of tech, and at the very end can be successful, putting all the elements and the tools and the experience together so that we can accomplish not only the vision, but also the promise that we have made the families and the students and in society at large.
And for you, I guess, not just being on the admission side, but running the LIFE program, I mean, is that carrying all the way through into how to make sure students are successful all the way through, not just picking them and hoping they succeed, but actually working with them? So critical thinking, the pillars that Carlos was talking about, you're trying to pull all that through as well?
Yeah, that's right. I'm not specifically on formal academic programs education, used to be one day, but now I'm on the co-curricular side. And one of the great discoveries that I have found doing this is that as the World Economic Forum has been portraying this type of needed skills for the future, and not all of them are knowledge-based or even cognitive-based. They could be also non-cognitive, which is a different topic from what we're talking about here. I've learned that having a model in which we can develop all these skills as a model to have an end result on the graduate, it's critical, for solving problems, for having the student being successful. And it's great to find out also, and Carlos was mentioning, because we used to think that developing critical thinking and other cognitive skills, we have to be teaching math and physics and science and all that. But it's also reflected in how you develop learning in sports, in the arts, in the social organizations within a university, and how at a point you can having educative intentions in those types of activities that can eventually develop this new type of skills.
Yeah, they may learn more outside the classroom than in the classroom, right?
Maybe. I'm not the right person to say that, but I'm sure. I would always say that.
Yes,
yeah,
yes.
But it's a compliment.
Oh, yes. No question.
Holistic education is about that. It's not discounting the traditional side instead of having the co-curricular side, but having a model in which you can have different avenues to touch the students, to challenge the student, and to start making him find out how to apply those skills. Because those skills are within every person. You just have to discover them.
Well, thank you very much. Jani, on to you. So, take it up now to maybe a national level. So actually, I think you talked a little bit about PISA earlier. But I guess, as you think about what's going on in Finland, you've got years of data now. And you've got years of data. You've got a lot of analysis. You're going next week to present to the ministry and everybody. And how do you move this forward? What happens, in a country like Finland, and what can others learn from what you're doing in Finland, and how they might be able to incorporate critical thinking and strengthen those skills in students?
Thank you, Bob. These are difficult questions, to be honest. Even if I don't touch upon the PISA question anymore, other than saying that we were a little bit surprised that the findings in Kappa's projects weren't that good, based on the fact that in PISA studies we've done pretty well in Finland, even though the trend is declining at the moment. But still, nonetheless, we are doing fine. But I mean, like I said, it's difficult to compare these two or connect these two ones. But the lessons learned, I'm always cautious about giving lessons from one context to another, because especially in terms of higher education systems are very much different to each other. I mean, if I compare to Mexican system, which I don't know that well, to Finland, it's like comparing apples and oranges, because as I told you in the morning, Finnish system is so small, so it's sort of easy probably to manage as opposed to the one here in Mexico or in the US. But the one thing that I think we've learned in Finland is, because we've more or less tested most of the higher education institutions that we have in Finland, is that there's a huge difference between institutions, how they deal with these issues. I mean, some of the institutions participate in the study simply because the ministry asks them to volunteer for the project, and they feel obliged to do so. But they really don't care much about the report that they receive of their own findings, and that's it. Whereas the other institutions are really paying attention to, like, they've already received the institutional reports of this Kappas 2 project, and some of them has been emailing me about a little bit disappointed over their results, but it shows that they care. So, I mean, it would be, I think, important that here in Mexico, there would be more institutions willing to, let's say, utilize CLA Plus or whatever instrument and develop their generic skills, so that it somehow would make the system more equal in terms of how they put effort in developing generic skills. Like in Finland, I'm a little bit worried that the disparities between institutions could grow, actually, because some of them are not interested. So I think it's important to have a sort of system-wide sort of motivation towards development of generic skills. And the second thing is that I'm a researcher at the end of the day, and I'm a huge believer of comparative research, so it would be nice to have a comparative research. Like, we had this Halo initiative, which never took off, but it was a political decision at the end of the day in the OECD. But of course, we can always do on a voluntary basis collaboration, and it would be really nice, because when you compare the findings, even if the systems are different, it gives you a different perspective to the same phenomenon. So in that sense, it would be nice to have sometime in the future some sort of comparative initiative. But I know it demands resources, but that's another thing. And then the third question was about the collaboration between high schools, universities, and authorities. From Finland, I can say that there isn't in terms of critical thinking per se, but the high schools and universities do collaborate in the sense that the high school students can take individual classes in the universities. But the reason, unfortunately, isn't for them to learn the critical skills and not probably even learn the actual topic that they are doing there. It's more about educational policy, that our government thinks that when the students can already take the university classes when they are in a high school, when they enter the universities, they will graduate faster because they already have done some courses. But I do believe that they also learn something, because many of them are the best students who do that. But in terms of critical thinking per se, we don't have such a tradition, which is sort of a pity. Like I said, one of the key findings in this second round of our project was that we really need to pay attention to the whole educational trajectory when we are developing the generic skills. So it would be nice to have a more collaboration between these different education sectors, also in terms of primary education or basic education, high schools and universities.
Great. Thank you very much. So we have two other questions for you. We'll just open this up to everybody. So what are the challenges that you faced or had to deal with to really move forward this culture? And maybe I'll start with you, Carlos, because it sounds like you've worked on this a good bit, to really incorporate this into the teaching and the learning and the faculty and the students. And so what are the challenges you face, and how did you overcome them?
Many. Many challenges. How to bottle the formula. Mm-hmm. No? And there is no magic formula, but we did find something that has worked. and that is something that I like to share. There is a partner organization that we work with. It's called the Institute for Humane Education, and they developed a framework that it's called the solutionary framework. We really like it because even if it is not something unique that didn't exist, they took from different approaches and different frameworks, but it's a process. It starts with the sorry, but I don't want to make a mistake. You have to start with identification. You identify, then you investigate, then you innovate, and then you implement. Mm-hmm. And the idea is that you contribute to provide solutions to issues that you care for. And then when you care about something that you're studying, you get motivated, and you want to do a good job. Therefore, you also think critically, etc. It's well bottled, and that has really worked communicating it with our audiences. It is the professional development course that has a waiting list in our faculty, so that's something really, really good. I think that is one of the battles that we have won. The other thing that I would say is a challenge, and we don't know yet how to fix it, is how to make students care about these exams, about these assessments. So someone else was sharing this. It matters for the school, it matters perhaps for the prestige of the institution, but it doesn't necessarily matter for the students who's taking the test. And sometimes it's not only one assessment, but for different reasons. You have to ask students to present several tests. And it's not only a burden for students, it's a burden for the faculty as well, and for the staff. So that is a challenge that we still have, and we need to figure it out. And the other issue is how to make students responsible and taking ownership of their own learning in high school. Because when they go to college, they already have made up their mind on their interest, mostly. But when they're in high school, they are younger. So how do we inspire them to be responsible for developing these competencies, for instance, for using AI with a purpose and responsible when it's easier just to use it to make my homework, and I have this excuse of being young. So that's a huge challenge. Personally, I'm talking as a teacher now. When you talk to students, when you have an open, respectful dialogue with them, and you don't make assumptions on the reasons, they care because they feel heard, they feel cared about, and that makes a difference.
Jani, I'm going to ask you next. Think about that. So you're at this point in your projects, and now maybe it is, how do we start training our faculty to do more critical thinking? What are the challenges you think you'll face, and think there are ways to overcome them?
I think we've heard most of the answers already during the day, because when I listen to the presentation of all of the colleagues, I think the same applies to Finland, that there are teachers who are disinterested, they couldn't care less. Leaders are disinterested, they don't want to allocate resources for such activities. But what I think is specific for Finland, and that's probably challenging, because I have a feeling that at the moment many institutions in Finland, there's really a sort of need for these sort of developing generic skills, but they are really lacking the sort of will, especially at the leadership level. And what is typical in Finland is that, or it at least has been, that the university leaders, they are unwilling to invest a lot of money. They feel that it's a lot of money if they invest to sort of training programs or something like that. But they think that it's easier if their own staff trains people, which actually is not true, because that demands a lot of resources too. But that's a sort of culture that we've had, that all the pedagogical development work in the university should be carried out by the own staff members. Some of the universities have their own units for that. But I mean, if they lack the means, if they lack the expertise, I mean, why invent the wheel again if it's invented somewhere else? So it's difficult to sort of persuade them to say that that this is something that you can quite easily get if you believe in the experts in the field. So that's probably is the biggest challenge in the future, just to make the leaders of the institutions to believe that this is important and you should invest more resources. Because like I said, there's clearly interest. I've noticed that because we've organized webinars with the institutions about their own findings when they received the institutional report, and there are lots of teachers and also vice rectors responsible for educational affairs that they seem to be really interested in about these. But then they don't move forward. So there's some sort of mismatch that I can't explain, but that's probably a cultural thing. So this is really the main issue at the moment.
Right. And Luis, Raúl, maybe a little different version of the question. So you're looking at these skills now from an admissions perspective. What kinds of challenges did you face convincing people, or maybe not quite convincing them, that these really are important skills to be considering as part of that process?
Yeah, we're in that part of the of the story. Having a hard time trying to convince everybody and have committees here, committees there, all the big kahuna, looking downwards what the faculty says, and on the opposite side as well, what leadership is saying about this, and nobody moves. So I'm one of the ones that explains this always with culture, and the great obstacle is the status quo. You were mentioning a few moments ago. You may have the discourse, but then you go back to the office, to the regular activity, and everything is business as usual. So that's very much what we need to identify in order to promote change, because the culture in education right now have a big struggle between content education and competence-based education. That's we have seen there in every book every paper that we have read, but in reality, it's a real struggle that we have every day in the different educative environments, and I'm grateful to have leaders at Tech such as Marco and others, people in our team as well, that are constantly pushing the idea that we have to break that struggle and get us out of that comfort zone that we have in universities and educative institutions. So in order to surpass the status quo challenge that we do have right now, it is important that we recognize what are the bottlenecks that we have in the process, because every time we evaluate the success rate of an educative process, it always comes back to the rules of the industry, as I was mentioning before. So how can we move to competence-based education in which we can incorporate critical thinking or problem solving or communication or interpersonal skills and leadership and all that? How can you move if, for example, here at Tech, one of the measurements that we declare to our accreditation agencies as an evidence of success is the Ceneval test that we have here in Mexico. The Ceneval test is a knowledge-based test that is rating the quality of the educative process. So how can we start talking about critical thinking if we're measuring success through content-based instruments? So we would have to push and work with these institutions, with Ceneval. Tech, of course, is leader in this, and we can take this opportunity to continue pushing the idea of incorporating this new type of skills, this new type of competence that we're pushing around with the new programs, and start moving the benchmarks in which we base success in the educative process. That's what I think, and that I think that's a big obstacle, a big challenge. Of course, as you were mentioning, it's complex. There's a lot of perspectives to overcome in terms of challenges, but that's what comes to mind when I talk about this.
Well, one last question, again, not on the list. So what impact will AI have? We've talked a lot about AI today, but on the work that you're doing, what impact do you think AI will have?
Do you want me to answer first?
Yeah, but then we'll go down there.
Well, yeah. Well, it's a huge impact. We're talking about the struggle between content-based education and competence-based. It's all there. How can we continue teaching content when everything's on the cloud? You see, it's simple, but it's huge. It's simple, but it's huge, and we have to move forward to start trying to, instead of thinking how can we teach our students do a business model or business canvas or whatever, why don't we start thinking how we can teach them this or develop in them this digital literacy or digital citizenship competency, one of the non-cognitive, I guess, or cognitive. I'm not in education. I speak as if I were in education. I'm a business guy. So how can we move forward if we are fixed thinking about how to teach contents to students? So it's simple, but it's huge. That would be my contribution.
Thank you.
Does it help?
It's interesting, and I mean, we do not have the answers, but I just like to share some thoughts. When you know how to drive, how do you say, stick?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
When you know how to drive stick, and then you get an automatic car, that's fine. You know, you get back to stick and you know how to drive. Right. But then if you start driving in automatic, and then suddenly it doesn't work, and you need to use a stick car, you cannot. So I believe the story is different for us who already know how to do things. Then we can use AI, and it's amazing. No? I just increase my productivity. I just can do way faster, but what I can already do. But the story goes different for a student who's learning, who doesn't know yet how to do things. So I think that's something we need to consider all the time. I do believe, so on the one hand, I believe we do need to keep our students learning as if the technology didn't exist, particularly in the first stages. Mm-hmm. When they get to high school, when they get to college, obviously we do need to incorporate technology in order to make them, successful and stuff. But what I think we haven't discussed as much as we should is, particularly in universities, particularly in schools that with the profile of, I'm going to talk about Tec de Monterrey and PrepaTec, we need to develop a mindset in which our students believe in themselves as the architects and the designers of what AI should be. We shouldn't be thinking on how to prepare our students on how to use AI and how to have the skills to don't get obsolete. No? I mean, the lady who is behind this institute that I was telling you about wrote a book. Her name is Sue Whale, and she wrote a book called The World Becomes What We Teach. No? Eugenio Garzazada, the founder of Tec de Monterrey, said, La educación lo puede todo. So I do believe if we work on this mindset, on you are the architect, it depends on how you take it. It depends on how you use it. And particularly as someone who's going to finish a degree and study a master and goes for a PhD, you're going to be the one designing and making the policies and making the laws on how to use it. So I think that's the way we should be addressing.
Jani, how about you? AI helping or hurting what you're trying to do in Finland?
Yeah, I'm fully agree with both of my colleagues, and this is of course a difficult question because it's so difficult to anticipate where we are 10 years from now, for example, with the AI. But I probably can reflect through my own experience, and when I look at my son, who is soon 7 years old, and the first time he used the iPad, he somehow immediately knew how to use it. I mean, I don't know how he did that, but he knew that. And it's what you said about the stick and automatic car. Now he grows up with the AI. So, I mean, it's normal part of his life. And I do feel that I'm too old because I know the world before the AI. So it's difficult for me to anticipate. So I'm probably tend to be quite positive, but we have to be on a driver's seat when it comes to the AI. The AI cannot be driving us, but we have to be driving the AI. But I'm not sure if that's always happening. And in terms of the critical thinking skills, I know I'm a bit more critical than Doris, for example, as we've been discussing about that, is that we now think that the critical thinking skills is something that differentiates us from the AI. But I'm not sure if that's the case in the coming years. I mean, because it's becoming more and more sort of developed. So it's so difficult to see what the future brings. But I tend to be positive that if we are on a driver's seat, things turn out to be fine.
Interesting. Are we taking questions now, Doris, or just going to wrap up?
Yeah, I mean, I think we have a question session now.
Okay.